Hi, and we are live. And welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday. My name is Michelle, aka the Ignited Teacher, here on social media. And what I do here on Teaching Tip Tuesday is I help math educators to effectively manage their classrooms and to increase student achievement. And I do that through classroom management, high quality math instructional strategies, project based learning, technology integration, and response to intervention. So, welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday. I thought we were not going to make it because I had a few little technical difficulties, but we're on nonetheless. So, if you're new here, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy this 30-minute segment with me. And if you watch me every week on Teaching Tube Tuesday, thank you for joining me and supporting this. What can I call it? A show? I guess it is now. I've been doing it for this is going on my second year. I can't believe it. So, if you have been a fan and my audience is growing on YouTube, which I am so excited about. So, with that being said, if you cannot catch me live, and I try to do it late enough, so it's at 8:30 for a reason because sometimes teachers have little kiddies that are going down at night and they can catch it live. But if you're not able to catch it live, you can catch me the replay on my YouTube channel. It is there for you all until I guess YouTube goes out of business or whatever. But I don't foresee that happening in the near future. So, tonight's Teaching Tip Tuesday is about building a classroom community and connecting with your students. Now, I normally go over this earlier in the school year, but our school year was pushed back. So I really hadn't touched on it, but I've been seeing a couple of posts and a couple of things, just even with us starting up virtually, that has a cause for concern. And we definitely need to address how to create a community in your virtual classroom. And it is difficult, let me tell you. It is so difficult to where one of my strengths is actually connecting with my students and bringing them together as a community, and to see them blossom over the school year, and go from like little individual people who are just looking out for self to caring about your student, and we pulling each other together in that community feel. But it has been difficult with the virtual learning, I can say. And I'm not saying that it's going to get any easier. I'm in these groups with COVID and the schools are shutting down, opening up. Teachers are going into quarantine. Children are being infected. Like, it's going to be crazy. And you might be asking yourself, how can I do my job effectively, connect with my students? Because I've been teaching 20 years, so I'm going into year 21. And I've had 20 years of normalcy. And to have this year just kind of seems so disconnected. So, one of the things that I am suggesting, I have a blog post, and if you look in the description of this live stream video, you'll see that there's a link to a blog post, and it talks about building intentional relationships and being very intentional about it. And that's the first thing that I'm going to suggest that you do. Relationships don't happen just arbitrarily and by osmosis. We just show up and the kids connect with us. It doesn't work like that. You have to be intentional about relationships. And if you weren't intentional about it prior to this, you want to be intentional about it now, because the students are awkward. they really don't know how, like the social emotional learning part of it. And one of the components of SEL is building relationships. A lot of our students don't know what those relationships and really appropriate relationships look like. That's one of the issues that we have. And when I say be intentional, for example, that looks like this. So my students from last year, I'm so accustomed to my students coming by. Like when I was teaching fifth grade, my students from the previous year had siblings that went to the school. So they would come by my classroom and we'd see them. They all going to middle school. And it was so good to see them. And I was missing that this year. So, I kind of just sat back and was like, what can I do to connect with my students? Now, I'm a math interventionist, so our classes are still being leveled. So I have some students and I have some that are trickling in, but I really wanted to connect with my students from last school year. So what I started to do, and we're using Teams, is I started messaging them. And it was so good to hear from them. And I was like a kid in a candy store, like somebody gave me a gift. And I really missed talking to them. They were so funny. And I just asked them how was their summer, and what are some things they did. I asked one of my students, I had her brother in fifth grade, and I asked her how he was doing. And it was just really good to connect with them, even though I wasn't there. And it was good for them because even in the chat, because we were chatting back and forth in the chat, and they would put little hearts on my messages. And one of my students said, she said, I miss your classroom. And I was like, oh, I miss you all too. And I told her, I said, you can always contact me if you need me. I said, I'm always here. And she said, I know. And then she put a little smiley face, and I heart her little chat message. And it was so good to connect with them because it was something that I needed, and I know that they need it as well. So I guess it started getting around, that I was reaching out to them. And one of my other students came and he was like, hey, Miss Williams. And I was like, hi. I did the little cat emoji, and he started laughing. And I was like, how's it going? And he was like, I'm going to football practice. And it brought a sense of normalcy. So that's one way you can connect. And even though I don't have those students anymore, they're still a part of my school's community. And the students that are new, so that's one way to connect with students that you had. The students that are new, one of the things that I suggest, and I did a podcast for, I forgot the guy's name, Sheldon Eakins. He's on Twitter. I did a podcast with him. I lost my train of thought. Podcast with him. And he talked about, because I have the course Managing Difficult Classrooms, about how to build relationships. Relationships in a classroom are not built around content. That is later on. It's not, you can't build a classroom community on content. Kids fall in love with your content most of the time, especially with the demographic that I teach, because I love it and what I bring to it and add to it, they become interested. That relationship on the front is just like any relationship. You have to be intentional about it. So I always suggest that teachers start with non-content things at the beginning of the year and give the kids some time to talk. Everything's not, if they don't get to the lesson or finish the lesson that day, it's not going to kill them. And I know some people are like, we have to stay on schedule. We have to stay on schedule. The curriculum, a curriculum. At the end of the day, you have to take the human factor and put it back into teaching. This is nothing that we've ever had to deal with. So you have to, and they say give grace and space, and you have to. You have to sprinkle that grace and space throughout this school year. And we're not going back to normal. We're not. And I've had to wrestle with that myself because this normal is no longer there. It's not. My 20 years of normal was shattered in about 8 months because we shut down in March, never to return, and still have not returned. And I know some people have asked, well, are you going back? I plan on returning. I do. I plan on returning back to my campus. Now, things may change in the interim, but that is my decision to go back. And when people ask me about what decisions they're going to make, I say make the best decision for your situation and your family. And some people, and you have to do that. So if you choose to go back, there are things, you have to give yourself the grace and space, and you have to give the students the grace and space to talk about these things because at the end of the day, we're human. And that's the reality of our situation. And that's how you connect with your students. Math is not going to connect my students. Teaching them uh, how to multiply integers, that's not going to help them connect with me. To know that I'm concerned about them. I have some new students that are new to the school. They don't know me from Adam. I have one little boy, he was like, what is this class? Because he's new to my school. And I told him I'm a math interventionist. He's taking geometry. And I said, I'm here to support you. And he was like, I just never got the math. He said, but I'm going to need you this year. And I was impressed because, to be honest with you, a lot of my students don't realize that they need me until they need me. So he was like, so are you going to help me with I was like, yes, I'm going to help you with the skills that you're going to need for geometry. So we'll work on some of those things. So I wrote his name down, but I was happy to know that he knew that he needed support in mathematics. And just talking about that and getting to know the students. In my Math Intervention Academy, I actually rolled out student profiles. And that's one of the things that I talk about in that first workshop, getting started with math intervention. You have to have a profile of your students. Who are they? Why are they in this class? And that's one of the things that I put in my Rolodex for him. And once I start putting together my student profiles, is that he's a student, he's aware. And that's part of social emotional learning, is creating awareness. So I noticed that if he's aware about what he needs for math, I can probably guarantee you that he's aware in other areas. So getting to know your students, talking to them, that builds relationships and connections. You cannot have a relationship with a student without connecting. And I'm going to say that again. You cannot have a relationship with a student without connecting. And the connection is made by conversation and getting to know them. And like I said, you can, like on Mondays, once my class really gets up and going, I'm going back to Documentary Monday. I love documentaries. So I share part of who I am with them, and we talk about real life things. The pandemic is going to be one of them. We're in an election year. I teach mathematics. We're going to talk about propaganda and data and all those things around how data is skewed. So I teach high school, and these kids are going to be voting in 3 years. So we talk about data being skewed. And there's a conversation that came up in one of the groups talking about giving your political view. You know what? You can do what you want to do. If my students ask me who I voted for, it's not a secret. I will tell them. My goal is to create informed voters. And that's my goal. Informed citizens, voters, all of that. And if they want to know, it's not secret. And some teachers was like, well, you have to, a vote is like telling people what kind of underwear you have on. Let's not be, come on now. It's not a political argument. I'm not here to sway children. I'm here to teach provide information and let them decipher it for themselves. Contrary to what most teachers think, kids come with their own opinions anyway, even when they're little. So it doesn't matter what you put out there. Sometimes children can be swayed, but we're teaching them how to think and decipher between the information that is out there. And that's also a way to connect with students. But kids have an opinion on things. But here's the thing. You can't connect with students if you're not giving them a chance to talk. But you have to give them the space to talk about things as well. And it's not going to always be comfortable. Sometimes I don't agree with my students, but I tell them, be informed about why you stand on certain things and be able to articulate that. And that's just one of my rules in my classroom. You can't say, well, this is what I believe. Well, it has to be some justification in that. And that's what I teach them. And that's what mathematics does. Because I can't wait. Because, one lady was saying that CNN student news was biased. CNN student news is not biased. All they do is present information, and that's it. And I take it and we decipher it during class about CNN student news, especially if it has to do with mathematics. But most of the time, I'm trying to give my students a broader view of the world, and those spark conversations. So if you're trying to connect with your students and build community, give them some grace and space to talk about things that are unrelated to your content. That's the first thing. You have to talk. Let the children talk and be intentional about these conversations. Think about the things that you talk about with your own children. If you don't have children, think about the things that you talk about with your own parents. And talk about those things in a more general context. There are a lot of things that are going on in the world. Broaden your horizon and connect. Be intentional and connect. Once you do that, then the relationship will form and you can build a community on that. Communities are not built on mathematics, reading, and all of this other stuff. They're just not. You have to dig a little deeper. Like I tell my students, take out your little shovel and dig a little deeper. And if it's not as easy as it used to be, and I'll be the first one to tell you, and you're going to have to be creative about how you're being intentional about building a classroom community and connecting with your students. So that's all I have for you for Teaching Tip Tuesday. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section on YouTube and on Facebook, and tweet to me on Twitter. If you have somebody that would enjoy this and needs to hear it, definitely share it with them. And I will see you all next time on Teaching Tip Tuesday.